Welcome to this edition of the Star Drive Report. In the previous edition of the Star Drive Report, we discussed the possible physics behind the extraordinary maneuvers of the so-called Tic Tac UFOs recorded in the Navy Super Hornet F-18 cockpit video taken over the USS Nimitz Strike Group off the coast of San Diego in November 2004. Today we're going to be interviewing a key witness and player in that now famous UFO incident. Kevin Day is a retired United States Navy Senior Chief Petty Officer. He's a former operations specialist and Top Gun air intercept controller with more than 20 years of experience in strike group air defense, including wartime operations. An expert operator of the highly advanced Lockheed AN Spy-1 phased array radar system with years of service on board Aegis-equipped ships, including the USS Vincennes, USS Chosin, and USS Princeton, Kevin has logged hundreds of air-to-air intercepts of suspect aircraft in both training and wartime operations. It was Kevin's team in the USS Princeton's Combat Information Center that discovered the fleets of anomalous air contacts in the skies above the USS Nimitz Strike Group's Southern California operating area back in 2004. Because these unidentified air contacts were in such close proximity to the Nimitz Strike Group while they were conducting at-sea training exercises and represented a potential hazard to safe flight operations, Kevin recommended investigating the contacts with a pair of FA-18 Super Hornets launched from the USS Nimitz. The Nimitz Strike Group's air defense commander concurred, and Kevin's team conducted the now famous intercept. Interestingly, it was to become Kevin's very last tactical intercept. It was also Kevin's very last underway deployment in the Navy prior to his retirement. I'd like to welcome our guest, retired U.S. Navy Senior Chief Petty Officer Kevin Day, and Dr. Jack Sarfati will also be joining us in the conversation.
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm here too.
Okay.
Loud and clear.
Okay, I want to begin by going back to that first week in November of 2004, and you were stationed on the USS Princeton, a Ticonderoga-class Aegis-guided missile cruiser, conducting exercises with the USS Nimitz battle group off of San Diego. And for the audience's information, Chief Day was the man responsible for giving the actual orders to launch air defensive missiles should the tactical situation warrant it. And what I'd like to do is have you pick up the story from the first moment you started receiving tracking information from the battle group about anomalous aerial targets being tracked in the area of operations, and just take us through what transpired after that.
Yeah, we were underway in Southern California operating areas off the coast of Mexico and San Diego, and the Nimitz Strike Group was with us. You know, it's the Princeton, the Nimitz, the Chafee, the Higgins, VAW 117, which is a Hawkeye squadron, and CAG 11, which is the captain for all the various air wing or squadrons that were on board the ship. You know, I guess it was like and I forget the exact watch I was on. It was sometime during the first week of November of 2004. I started seeing these anomalous contacts appearing on the radar up around San Clemente Island. And sometimes there was as many as 10 in the group at once. And I've noticed them for a couple of days, and it was very curious because they were about 28,000 feet, and they were tracking in a tight group, all tracking down to the south about 100 knots, which is really weird because things that high would normally fall out of the sky going that slow.
What was the range that you were tracking these at?
We were approximately 100, 120 miles south of where we were picking them up at.
Did you report this to the higher ups? I mean, did you?
Oh yeah.
What did they say?
Oh, yeah. Strangely enough, no one really seemed to be concerned about them. In fact, I remember watching these things for a couple days before anyone else even said anything about them, which was really my concern because this was my last underway on the ship. And I was in a training role, and I was waiting for the rest of the watch team to say something. And finally, when I couldn't take it anymore, I finally said something, and as it turns out, everyone else had been watching them too. But apparently, it was so far outside of anyone's experience that no one really knew what to make of it. And during those first couple of days, I had gone back channeled to some of my friends on the other ships, and sure enough, the other ships were seeing them. And I mean, they were pretty benign, and they in no way seemed at all hostile, and they were extremely curious as to what they were. And the problem was the next week we were getting ready to conduct major flight operations. We're going to do an air defense exercise. And I kind of had it in the back of my mind that if those things were still there when we started launching aircraft, I was going to recommend to the Captain Smith on the Princeton, that we should probably intercept them to see what they are. So, because my concern was their safety of air navigation.
Sure.
I didn't want to run into one of these
Sure,
things.
absolutely.
They were in no way, I was in no way concerned they were hostile, in other words. I was more concerned about the safety of the flight crews.
Right, navigation hazard.
So, say again, please?
Just a navigation hazard for the pilots, possibly.
Precisely, yeah, because 28,000 feet, that's right in the altitudes we like to play in, that altitude layer right there. And sure enough, on the 14th came along, and the ADEX was getting ready to launch, and the captain came down to combat. And I said, "Hey, sir, these contacts we've been watching, fairly anomalous or definitely real. We've got them on CEC, the cooperative engagement capability, and our friends on the other ships are seeing them. All the watch standers here in combat have been been watching them for a few days now. And I highly recommend we take one of the aircraft and we go look at it, and just to see what it is, because if we launch all the aircraft and there's an accident, someone's going to ask why we didn't investigate it." And he said, "You're right. Go ahead, intercept it."
Okay.
And so it just happened to be the Commander Fravers flight up. He was up doing a functional flight check, getting ready for the ADEX out to the south of us a little ways. And so we took control of the Fast Eagle flight, which was his flight, from the E2 squadron, and we started vectoring them towards the closest one that was on the scope. And nothing really interesting happened until I was almost at merge plot, which basically is in terms of radar, they're in the same vertical piece of sky. The radar resolutions, I just see one blob because both radars merged together on the scope. And right about that moment, he all of a sudden on the overhead radio, I hear, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I'm engaged. And he's just screaming.
Wait a minute, he's engaged? What
extremely concerned.
Meaning that he had visual contact.
Yeah, he wasn't. And it's kind of a misleading terminology, but it doesn't mean that you're firing
right.
Guns or missiles at each other. You're just in a furball. And he kept his wingman kind of at the higher altitude. He went down to take a look down to the surface of the ocean. And that thing, as soon as he got down there by it popped straight back out of the water, or out off the surface of the ocean, I should say, back up to 28,000 feet and continued. Oh
wow! I
didn't
know that.
About 100 knots, and it was so bizarre. I found out later that these things actually made that movement from 28,000 feet to 50 feet in less than a second, 0.78 seconds, because we did a data reduction on the CEC. After this was all over.
Jack, is that?
Which was.
Let me just get to Jack for a second here.
Yeah.
Jack, is that what Bruce Maccabee, when he talked about the incredible G-forces necessary to do maneuver?
Yeah,
like that?
I'd have to do a calculation, but that's something you got to discuss also with Bruce in the next podcast with Maccabee. That's a very interesting piece of information.
Okay, continue, Kevin.
Yeah, and so during this time, we had other aircraft starting to launch off the Nimitz because everyone's doing their functional flight checks. And, of course, everyone's listening to the radios, and everyone's sharing this radar data on their onboard systems on the aircraft. So everyone at this point is aware that all these anomalous contacts are out there. And, of course, fighter pilots are very curious creatures by nature, and they're all Type A personalities. So they all took off to intercept their own objects out there in the sky just to see what the heck they were. And it was unbelievable. These things, at the time that the first Fravor intercept happened, I think there was probably 10 of these things airborne. And these things all started dropping out of the sky from 28,000 feet down to the surface of the ocean. And at one point, it was actually literally raining UFOs just to the north of us.
How many would you
coming out of the sky?
How many would you say there were? I mean, is there any rough estimate?
There was probably 10 that day. I'd been seeing them in groups of between 5 and 10 for a few days, before that.
All right. So before these planes were sent up, they weren't behaving in this fashion. They were just flying around in maybe in group formations and things, or stationary. But as soon as the fighters went up, they
They reacted.
went haywire, crazy.
They were totally aware of this, and they totally reacted to this.
Okay.
But the curious thing was, what I found so odd is once the friendly fighters left the immediate area, these things all popped back into the sky, 28,000 feet, started going 100 knots again towards Mexico, as if nothing interesting at all had happened. As if they just wanted to be left alone, in other words.
Yeah. So they
Still
clearly,
no hostile intent.
they clearly reacted to the presence of the jets. Okay.
Absolutely.
Let me interrupt. Those
bet,
numbers, Jack. It's Jack. Those numbers you gave, 28,000 feet to surface roughly in what, 0.87 seconds, or was it 7.8? But in any case, like less than a second. That's like 36,000 G Earth G force at 36,000
That's
Earth gravity.
Astonishing.
Yeah, which is impossible.
Well,
I mean,
it's impossible.
So,
It's impossible by ordinary impulse
physics, yeah.
Yeah, by ordinary propulsion, but it's not impossible by gravity control, warp drive. In fact, that's the only way it could happen.
Of course, I didn't know any of that at the time. Yeah. I just knew that they were highly anonymous, and of course, by this time, I'm thinking UFO. I'd never seen anything like this, and in fact, I had promised myself years and years and years ago.
Right, correction. It's 3,000
air controller.
Sorry, Kevin. I forgot to divide by 10. It's 3,600 G, but it's still pretty good. Yeah, I'm doing this on the.
You're off by a factor there, I think. Yeah.
So 3,000. Oh, yeah, thousands of G.
Yeah.
Okay, Kevin. I'm curious. Okay, after the planes came back, I'm really curious as to what was going on board. What was going on the ships? I mean, what was the scuttlebutt? Did you get any information from the higher-ups? Was there any outside interest in what had just transpired, as far as you know?
As far as I know, the answer is no. In fact, it was it was very curious. I went up later. I was going to do a Operate 3 message in navy blue and try to start doing the background to put this message together. And I went to the voice data recorder, and I had the technician there with me, and we record the optical disc on several redundant tracks on all of our external comms in case a mishap happens. The investigators can go back and figure it out. That came in the Navy right after the Vincennes incident in '98. And strangely enough, all of the time hacks for all the comms are on the disc, but all the comms are gone.
What?
There was no comms on the disc.
Somebody had tampered. There. Somebody had erased information off the discs.
I don't know how you erase an optical disc. That type of optical, it's designed so it can't be erased.
Or could it have been?
So either it could have been swapped out, and I didn't know about it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I think happened, but I just don't know.
Right.
And I've learned since that several other of my shipmates and the sailors on other ships had indeed had to sign non-disclosure agreements when they delivered the radar data over to some mysterious people that showed up to take it.
Who showed up?
And the rumor is it was a couple of Air Force guys that flew in on a helicopter. And you have to remember, I'm going on secondhand with that because I had no idea all that was going on.
Right.
No one ever approached me. No one ever talked to me. No one ever told me to sign the NDA.
Right.
But at the same time, I was only the guy. The only thing I had was a memory. I didn't actually have possession of physical radar data.
Okay.
Like the other people did. So maybe that was the difference. Maybe that they only were concerned about NDAing the people that actually had
did you ever
data.
Did you ever have any conversations with some of the people who had to sign NDAs?
Then and later, yeah. But at the time, of course, they were told to shut up.
Right.
They couldn't tell me what was happening. But over the last year, we've a lot of us are reconnected, and we're trying to figure out what happened and put this thing back together.
Right. Are those people?
Recently, I have talked to them. Yes.
Are those people still under those NDAs?
Yes.
They are.
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah. Yep. Huh. I don't know if they ever run out. I don't know when they expire, or because I didn't have to sign one.
Right,
But,
right. How?
and I can go ahead, please.
I just, how did you, after all this transpired, what was going on in your head? I mean, how were you dealing with this?
I was thinking, hey, that's pretty cool. We intercepted UFOs, and I'd always promised myself, I'm a Top Gun air intercept control graduate, and I got hundreds of intercepts, in my logbook, both, in the wartime footing and many deployments to the Middle East. And this was by far the strangest intercept. This turned out to be my last underway and my last intercept in the Navy. And I was thinking when we pulled back into port that I intercepted a UFO. I didn't know what else to make of it. I didn't know the term UAP at the time. I was thinking, I was still calling them UFOs.
I read your I read your short memoir, which I found interesting, and just from what you wrote, I mean, I know it's done in sort of a semi-fictional point of view, but it seemed to me that this really profoundly affected you.
Yeah, it did. It gets kind of personal, and I kind of hesitate to say too much, but
that's all right.
I firmly believe now today that I've been under the influence of Valley Davis post effects this whole time, and I just didn't know it. And you're familiar with Valley Davis, I'm sure.
Yeah, the Valley Davis.
Six-layer model, incommensurability, orthodoxy, and the physics of high strangeness.
Right.
They got a six-layer model for an anomalous phenomenon.
Right.
And I have actually experienced every single layer, probably with the exception of levitation. That's never happened to me.
Have you seen any UFOs since then?
No, I have not.
You have not?
Nope. I've seen a lot of other stuff, but not UFOs. And that's probably a function of me not going outside at night too much. I just don't do it anymore.
I'll tell you a little story. When I was on board the Ranger, and we were bombing North Vietnam almost 24/7 for the month of December, just before December of '72. I got to be friends with a couple of pilots, A6 pilots and F4 pilots, and they would come down to the photo lab and hang out. And I was always into the subject of UFOs, having seen them all my life. And I talked to a couple of pilots, and they told me some pretty amazing stories, but they, of course, never reported that, because of, obviously, they had been told that that's not a good thing to do. Could negatively impact their naval career. But I'm just wondering, how many pilots out there do you think have seen these things? I'm sure it's way more than anybody would imagine.
I would have to say pretty much anyone that's ever flown professionally has probably seen anomalous things in the sky at one point or another. They're out there. They truly are. Well,
Kevin, I think we pretty much covered it. Anything else you'd like to add?
I just, we got some stuff coming up. We got the UFO MegaCon coming up in March in Laughlin, Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the website's UFO MegaCon.
Are you going to be at that?
Yeah, I'm going to be giving a 1-hour talk, talking
Great.
specifically on this and what was happening in CIC and what's happened to me personally since. And also, there's going to be a roundtable group discussion with some of the other experiencers from not only the Nimitz Tic Tac case, but also Gimbal, I hope, over on the East Coast. Because this happened again in 2015 to an entire another Navy outfit off the East Coast.
Really?
And Robert Kiviat is going to be doing a roundtable discussion. And it should prove to be pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, the thing that really... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The thing that really...
I was going to say, our only function is just to confirm that it happened, and I can't speak for everyone else, but I'm not even going to speculate what these things were, because it's not really my role.
Well, you can't. You don't know.
The only thing I want to do is confirm. I would just want to confirm that, yes, they were real, and it really, really happened.
Okay, that's where I come in, as Jack. I know what they were. I'm pretty sure.
Well, the thing that really strikes me as, well, not odd, but certainly suspicious, is the utter silence, up the chain of command about all this. It's as though they were following a script.
Either that or
Yeah,
they're
in
just
fact, Commander Fravor was really upset. I found out recently that I guess he did write a report, and I guess the admiral of our strike group just sat on it,
Yeah.
didn't do anything at all with it.
well. That's a
Maybe he was
typical.
told not to. I don't know. I
This,
just
let me
don't know
let me
what
just
happened.
interrupt for a minute, Jack. This Jack. That's a typical bureaucratic reaction. Just stonewall something they don't understand. Just say nothing about it. That's very typical.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, when is this conference happening?
Ask it again, please.
When is this UFO conference happening, and where again?
Oh, so very last week of March, in the spring coming up.
Okay, I might try to attend that. Well, that about wraps
That would
up
be cool.
that about wraps up our time, Kevin. And I'd really like to thank you for a fascinating interview. And maybe we'll do it again in the future, depending on what happens.
Right.
I'm available.
Great.
And nice to talk to you.
All right,
and
Kevin.
Jack.
You have a great day.
Okay. Bye, Kevin.
Okay. All right.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.